A white mother is shocked when her 8-year-old son walks through the door holding black twin babies. As she scrambles to understand what happened, questions arise. Who abandoned these twins, and what hidden truth lies buried beneath their innocent cries? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The sun was shining brightly as Alan raced across the park, his laughter echoing through the air. His ball bounced ahead of him, always just out of reach. The grass was soft under his feet, and the breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers. It was a perfect day for playing outside. But as Alan chased his ball, he didn't notice the dark clouds rolling in. They crept across the sky, slowly blocking out the sun. The first drops of rain fell softly, barely noticeable. Then, without warning, the sky opened up and rain poured down in sheets. "Oh no!" Alan cried, raising his arms to shield his face from the sudden downpour. He looked around frantically for shelter, his clothes already soaked through. That's when he heard it. A faint cry, almost lost in the sound of the rain. Curious and concerned, Alan followed the sound. It led him to a large oak tree at the edge of the park. There, nestled among its roots, was a wicker basket. The crying grew louder as he approached. Alan's eyes widened in shock as he peered inside. 2 tiny babies, their dark skin glistening with raindrops, squirmed and wailed. They were so small, so helpless. Alan's heart raced. He couldn't leave them here in the rain. Without hesitation, he scooped up the basket. The babies were heavier than he expected, and he struggled to keep his balance. Rain pelted down, soaking through the thin blanket covering the infants. They cried louder, their tiny bodies shivering from the cold. "It's okay," Alan whispered, though his voice shook with fear and uncertainty. "I'll get you somewhere safe." He looked around wildly, trying to figure out what to do. Home. He needed to get home to his mom. She would know what to do. Carefully, Alan set the basket down and shrugged off his jacket. It wasn't much, but it was dry on the inside. He draped it over the babies, tucking it around them as best he could. Then, with a deep breath, he picked up the basket again and started to run. Houses blurred past as Alan ran through the neighborhood. Water streamed down his face, a mix of rain and sweat. Finally, he saw his house come into view. With a burst of energy, Alan sprinted up the driveway. He fumbled with the doorknob, his wet hand slipping on the metal. After what felt like forever, he managed to turn it and burst inside. "Mom!" he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Mom! Help!" Jessica appeared in the hallway, a dish towel in her hands. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of her son, dripping wet and panting heavily. But it was what Alan held that made her gasp. 2 tiny faces peeked out from under Alan's jacket, their cries now weak and pitiful. Jessica stood frozen, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. "Alan," she said slowly, where did you get those babies?" Alan's lower lip trembled. "I found them in the park, Mom. They were all alone in the rain. I couldn't leave them there." Jessica stepped closer, her heart pounding. The babies were so small, clearly newborns. Their dark skin contrasted sharply with the pale blanket they were wrapped in. As she looked at them, one of the infants opened its eyes, revealing deep brown irises that seemed to plead for help. 1,000 thoughts raced through Jessica's mind. Who would abandon such tiny babies? What were they supposed to do now? But as she looked at the shivering infants and her son's frightened face, she knew they had to act fast. "Okay," Jessica said, taking a deep breath to calm herself. "We need to get them warm and dry. Alan, go get some towels from the bathroom." As Alan rushed off, Jessica gently lifted one of the babies from the basket. Its tiny body felt so fragile in her hands. "It's all right, little one," she murmured, her maternal instincts kicking in despite her shock. "You're safe now." Jessica paced back and forth in the living room, her arms cradling the 2 tiny infants wrapped in fluffy towels. The babies' cries had softened to whimpers, but their distress still tugged at her heart. Alan hovered nearby, his clothes still damp from the rain, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and worry. "I can't believe you found them in the park," Jessica said, shaking her head in disbelief. Who would do such a thing? Alan nodded eagerly, his words tumbling out in a rush. I heard them crying, Mom. They were just lying there in a basket under a big tree. I couldn't leave them. Jessica smiled at her son, pride swelling in her chest despite the bizarre situation. You did the right thing, sweetheart. These little ones needed help. She looked down at the babies, their dark skin a stark contrast to the white towels. Their tiny fingers curled around the edge of the fabric, and Jessica felt a surge of protectiveness wash over her. We need to call someone, she said, more to herself than to Alan. Social services or the police. They'll know what to do. With a deep breath, Jessica carefully placed the babies on the couch, surrounding them with pillows to keep them safe. She reached for the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. The conversation with social services was frustrating. Jessica's voice grew increasingly strained as she explained the situation, only to be met with apologies and excuses. I understand you're busy, but we have 2 newborn babies here, she said, trying to keep her tone even. They need proper care. We don't even have any formula or diapers. The response made her close her eyes in exasperation. 2 days? You can't get here for 2 days? She listened for a moment longer before sighing heavily. Yes, all right. We'll do our best. Please come as soon as you can. Jessica hung up the phone and turned to Alan, who was watching her anxiously. They're understaffed, she explained. They can't come for a couple of days. Alan's brow furrowed. What are we going to do, Mom? Before Jessica could answer, her husband's voice drifted over from the armchair where he lounged, eyes glued to the television. What's the big deal? Just take care of them for a couple days and quit whining about it. Jessica felt a flare of anger at his dismissive tone. The big deal is that we have 2 newborn babies who need round-the-clock care, and we're not prepared for this. Her husband, Jack, shrugged, not even bothering to look away from the screen. You raised Alan. Can't be that different. Jessica bit back a sharp retort, reminding herself that the babies were the priority right now. She turned back to Alan, who was looking between his parents with a worried expression. Okay, Jessica said, taking a deep breath. We need supplies. Alan, can you run to the store? We need formula, diapers, and some baby clothes. Alan nodded eagerly, clearly relieved to have a task. Sure, Mom. What kind should I get? Jessica paused, realizing she wasn't sure. It had been years since Alan was a baby. Get the newborn size for everything, she said, and ask the pharmacist for help with the formula. Tell them it's for newborn twins. Once it stopped raining, Alan grabbed his jacket and headed out. Jessica turned back to the babies. They were starting to fuss again, their little faces scrunching up in discomfort. She picked them up, one in each arm, and began to sway gently. It's okay, little ones, she murmured softly. We'll figure this out. Alan then got all the supplies Jessica wanted, and the next hours were spent taking care of the little ones. The next morning, Jessica jolted awake to the sound of crying. For a moment, she was disoriented, wondering why there were 2 babies wailing instead of just one. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back and she groaned softly. Coming, little ones, she mumbled, stumbling out of bed. Her husband was already gone, having left early for work without so much as a word. In the living room, Jessica found the twins squirming in their makeshift bed of blankets on the couch. Their tiny faces were scrunched up in distress, and Jessica felt a pang of guilt for not waking up sooner. Shh, it's okay, she soothed, picking them up carefully. Let's get you some breakfast. In the kitchen, Jessica fumbled one-handed with the new formula container, trying to read the instructions while balancing 2 fussy infants. She'd never made formula before. Alan had been breastfed, and the process seemed unnecessarily complicated in her sleep-deprived state. How much water? How many scoops? She muttered, squinting at the tiny print. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to prepare 2 bottles, praying she'd done it correctly. As she fed the babies, taking turns with each one, Jessica's mind wandered to the day ahead. Suddenly, she gasped, nearly dropping the bottle. Oh no, she whispered, Alan's birthday party. In all the chaos, she'd completely forgotten about the gathering planned for that afternoon. 5 families from their neighborhood were coming over, all of them white, like Jessica's family. She'd been planning this party for weeks, determined to make Alan's day special. Jessica's stomach churned as she imagined her friends' reactions to the two black infants. Would they understand? Or would they judge her, whispering behind her back about how she'd brought these babies into their community? For a moment, Jessica considered canceling the party. It would be easier, safer. But then she thought of Alan's excited face when she'd told him about the celebration. How could she disappoint him? "No," Jessica said firmly, more to herself than to the babies. "We're having this party. I'll just keep you hidden." As soon as the thought crossed her mind, Jessica felt ashamed. Hidden. Like the babies were something to be embarrassed about. But the fear of judgment, of losing her friends and her place in the community, was overwhelming. With a heavy heart, Jessica began to prepare. She cleaned the living room, hiding any evidence of the twins' presence. She baked Alan's favorite chocolate cake, all while keeping one eye on the babies napping on a blanket in the corner. As the party time drew nearer, Jessica faced her most challenging task, finding a safe place for the twins during the gathering. Her eyes fell on the small closet in her bedroom. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Jessica gathered soft blankets and pillows, creating a cozy nest in the closet floor. She moved the twins there, her heart aching as she looked down at their peaceful faces. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I promise it's just for a little while." Soon after that, Jessica took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and stepped out into the front yard. The sun beat down on her as she waved to the first guests arriving. "Hi there, welcome," she called out, hoping her voice didn't betray her nerves. As more families arrived, Jessica found herself falling into a rhythm of greetings and small talk. She ushered everyone into the backyard, where Alan was already playing with some of his friends. "The cake looks amazing, Jessica," one of the moms exclaimed. Jessica beamed. "Thanks, I hope it tastes as good as it looks." For a while, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The kids were happily running around, the adults were chatting, and Jessica started to relax. Maybe this would work out after all. But then, just as they were about to cut the cake, a faint cry drifted through the air. Jessica froze, her heart pounding. She glanced around, hoping no one else had heard it. The cry came again, louder this time. Jessica saw a few of the adults tilt their heads, looking confused. "What's that sound?" one of the dads asked. Jessica laughed nervously. "Oh, it's probably just the neighbor's baby. You know how thin these walls are?" But the crying continued, growing more insistent. Jessica could feel the curious stares of her guests boring into her. "Jessica," her friend Sarah said slowly, "that doesn't sound like it's coming from next door. It sounds like it's coming from inside your house." Jessica's mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation. But before she could speak, another mom chimed in. "Is there something you're not telling us, Jessica? What's going on?" The crying grew louder, and now Jessica could hear both babies wailing. She closed her eyes, knowing the jig was up. I have something to show you," she said quietly. With heavy steps, Jessica led the group of adults into the house and to her bedroom. She opened the closet door, revealing the two crying infants nestled in their makeshift bed. Gasps filled the room as Jessica gently picked up the twins, cradling them close. "Where did they come from?" someone asked. Jessica explained about Alan finding them in the park, her voice shaking slightly as she recounted the story. As she finished speaking, she looked up at her friends, hoping to see understanding in their eyes. Instead, she was met with looks of shock, disgust, and judgment. "Jessica, what were you thinking?" Sarah exclaimed. "You can't just take in some black babies off the street." Another friend, Mike, shook his head. "This is crazy. You should just leave them back where Alan found them. It's not your problem." Jessica stared at him in disbelief. "Leave them in the park? They're babies, Mike. They could die." "Well, it's not like they're—" Mike's wife, Lisa, started to say, then trailed off, her eyes darting to the twins' dark skin. Jessica felt a surge of anger rising in her chest. "Not like they're what, Lisa? Not like they're white?" The room fell silent, the only sound the soft whimpers of the babies in Jessica's arms. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," Jessica said, her voice low and trembling with fury. These are innocent children, and you're suggesting I abandon them? What kind of people are you?" Sarah stepped forward, her face pinched with disapproval. "Jessica, be reasonable. You can't keep them. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think," Jessica snapped. "I care about doing what's right. These babies needed help, and I'm not going to turn my back on them just because it might make some people uncomfortable. CPS will pick them up by tomorrow, they've said, so this arrangement will only last till then." She looked around at the faces of those she had considered friends, seeing them now in a new light. "If you can't find it in your hearts to have some basic human compassion, then I don't want you here. This party is over." Jessica stood at her front door, watching the last car disappear down the street. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. No, it was anger that made her tremble. Anger at the cruelty and indifference she had just witnessed from people she thought were her friends. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The sound of sniffling behind her made her turn. Alan stood there, his eyes wide and confused. "Mom," he said quietly, "why were they so mean about the babies?" Jessica's heart ached. How could she explain something so ugly to her innocent child? She knelt down, putting her hands on Alan's shoulders. "Sometimes, honey," she began, choosing her words carefully, "people can be unkind to others who look different from them. It's called racism, and it's a very wrong and hurtful thing." Alan's brow furrowed. "But why? The babies didn't do anything wrong." "You're right, they didn't," Jessica agreed. "That's why racism is so unfair. It judges people not by who they are, but by how they look." She pulled Alan into a hug, feeling a surge of pride for her empathetic son. "But you know what? We're not going to be like that. We're going to help these babies because it's the right thing to do." Alan nodded against her shoulder. "Can I help take care of them?" Jessica smiled, ruffling his hair. "Of course you can, sweetie. Now let's go check on them, okay?" They walked back to the bedroom where the twins lay in their makeshift crib. The babies had settled down after all the commotion, their tiny chests rising and falling with each breath. Jessica gently picked up one of the infants, cradling it close. She looked down at the innocent face and felt a fierce protectiveness wash over her. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered to the baby. "I promise I'll keep you safe until we find out where you belong." She sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall. Alan settled next to her, peering curiously at the baby in her arms. Later that evening, her husband got home. He was visibly upset to see the black twins still in their house, but could not say anything since he knew CPS would come the next day. The babies cried throughout the night, and he asked Jessica to shut them up, clearly annoyed by the disruption. Worried about the infant's health the next morning, Jessica decided to take the twins to the local clinic for a checkup. She bundled them up carefully, strapping them into the car seats she had borrowed from a neighbor. With Alan by her side, they made their way to the doctor's office. As they entered the clinic, Jessica noticed Dr. Darius Carter at the reception desk. He was a tall, dark-skinned man with a kind face, known for his gentle demeanor. But when his eyes fell on the twins, something strange happened. Dr. Carter's face went pale, his eyes widening in shock. For a moment, he seemed frozen in place, staring at the infants as if he'd seen a ghost. Jessica felt a prickle of unease run down her spine. "Dr. Carter?" she called out hesitantly. "Is everything all right?" The doctor blinked rapidly, seeming to shake himself out of his daze. Jessica told him the complete story of how she found the babies. He plastered on a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yes, of course. My apologies, Mrs. Banks. Let's get these little ones checked out, shall we?" As they followed him into the exam room, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Dr. Carter's hands trembled slightly as he examined the twins, his movements lacking their usual confidence. "Well," he said finally, his voice overly cheerful, "I'm happy to report that these babies are in good health considering their circumstances. They'll need proper care, of course, but they're doing well." Jessica nodded, relieved. But then Dr. Carter said something that made her pause. "You know, Mrs. Banks," he began, not quite meeting her eyes, "instead of trying to give them into the system, Have you considered keeping them yourself? Or perhaps finding someone who needs children? Jessica stared at him, baffled. I'm sorry, what? Dr. Carter, these babies were abandoned. We need to find their family or get them proper help through social services. The doctor's face tightened. Of course, I just thought, well, sometimes these things happen for a reason. Maybe you were meant to find them. That's absurd, Jessica sputtered. Doctor, I can't just keep them. That wouldn't be right. Dr. Carter nodded quickly, his smile strained. You're right, of course. Forget I said anything. I'm sure social services will handle everything properly. As they left the clinic, Jessica's mind was whirling. Why had Dr. Carter acted so strangely? His reaction to seeing the twins, his odd suggestion about keeping them, none of it made sense. While on her way back from the doctor's office, Jessica received a call from social services that left her reeling. The voice on the other end sounded apologetic but firm. Mrs. Banks, we've looked into the case of the twins you found, the social worker said. I'm afraid we have some troubling news. There are no records of any missing black twins in the area. Jessica's heart sank. What does that mean? The social worker sighed. It's possible. Well, it's possible that these babies were deliberately abandoned. We're still investigating, but it delays matters. I request you to please take custody of the kids in the meantime if we can. If not, we can send someone down there, but to be honest, given that they are newborns, staying in an outdoor facility might not be the best idea for them. She faced a moral dilemma that she never expected. Should she keep the twins until their story was uncovered? Or should she let the system decide their fate? The thought of handing them over to an uncertain future made her stomach churn. After hours of internal debate, Jessica made her decision. She would keep the twins, at least until more information came to light. She couldn't bear the thought of them being lost in the system, especially with their mysterious background. With a deep breath, she approached her husband, who was lounging on the couch as usual. We need to talk about the babies, she said firmly. He glanced up from his phone, barely interested. What about them? Jessica explained the situation, her voice growing more passionate as she spoke. I think we should keep them for now, just until we figure out what's really going on. Her husband shrugged. If that's what you want, I guess we can manage for the time being, but don't expect me to touch them or help you out with anything. His indifference bothered her, but Jessica was grateful he didn't outright object. She threw herself into caring for the twins with renewed determination. As the day passed, Jessica found herself falling into a routine with the babies. She learned their cries, their preferences, the little things that made them smile. It wasn't easy, but there was a joy in it that she hadn't expected. Alan, too, seemed to blossom with the arrival of the twins. As an only child, he had always been a bit lonely. Now he eagerly helped with the babies, fetching diapers or singing them lullabies. 2 days after Jessica's decision to keep the twins, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and was surprised to see Dr. Darius Carter's name flashing on the screen. Curious, she answered. Hello, Dr. Carter, Jessica said, balancing one of the twins on her hip. Mrs. Banks, the doctor's voice sounded strained. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, Jessica replied, though she was wondering about the reason for his call. There was a pause before Dr. Carter spoke again. I was just wondering, have you, found a place for those children yet? Or perhaps, have you heard from the police about anything? Jessica's brow furrowed in confusion. The police? Why would the police be involved? I've only been in touch with Child Protective Services. Oh, yes, of course, Dr. Carter stumbled over his words, his usual composure seeming to slip. I meant CPS. My mistake. Jessica's suspicion grew. Something about the doctor's tone didn't sit right with her. Is everything all right, Dr. Carter? Yes, everything's fine, he said quickly. I just wanted to check in. If you need any help or financial aid with the babies, please let me know. I'd be happy to assist. At first, Jessica was touched by the offer. That's very kind of you, Dr. Carter. Thank you. As she ended the call, however, a nagging feeling settled in her stomach. Jessica sat down on the couch, her mind racing. Why was Dr. Carter so interested in these babies, and why had he mentioned the police? The more she thought about it, the more suspicious it seemed. She recalled their first meeting, how the doctor had insisted she either keep the twins or give them to someone who needed children. At the time, she had dismissed it as odd but well-intentioned advice. Now, in light of this strange phone call, it took on a more sinister tone. Jessica looked at the twins peacefully napping in their makeshift crib. What was she missing? What secret lay behind their mysterious appearance in the park? And what role did Dr. Carter play in all of this? Once she got home, with a determined sigh, she picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. It was Cindy, a woman who worked at Dr. Carter's clinic for years and was also one of Jessica's close friends. "Hey, Cindy," Jessica said when her friend answered. "Got a minute to chat?" "For you, always," Cindy replied cheerfully. "What's up?" Jessica took a deep breath. "I need to ask you something about Dr. Carter. I know you work at the clinic, and, well, something weird happened." Jessica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Well, it's about Dr. Carter. I took some kids to see him yesterday. Long story, I'll fill you in later. But he acted really off, like he knew something he wasn't saying. It's been bugging me, and I thought maybe you'd know if there's something going on." Cindy's voice lowered, taking on a more serious tone. "You know, Jess, you're not the first to say he's been acting weird, and honestly, there's a bit of a backstory with him that's been floating around the clinic for a while." Jessica leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter. "What backstory?" "Well," Cindy began, sounding like she was glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. "A while ago, there was a situation with a nurse. A black woman, real quiet and sweet. She and Dr. Carter got close. It didn't stay a secret for long, at least not among the staff." Jessica's curiosity sharpened. "How close are we talking?" Cindy paused before answering, her voice turning softer. "The kind of close that ends up with rumors about babies, Jess. Twins, maybe. People said she showed signs, you know. But then, things got complicated. Dr. Carter, he wasn't too thrilled when he found out. Tried to keep it all under wraps." Jessica's heart skipped a beat, her thoughts racing. "Wait, twins? Are you sure?" Cindy sighed. "Look, it's all just talk around the clinic, but from what I've heard, she might have had the babies. But here's the thing. When she confronted Dr. Carter, they had a big argument that ended in her getting fired. Pool gal was already working hard to make ends meet. I think she lives at the local women's shelter now." "Do you have her contact info? A phone number, maybe? I think I need to talk to her," Jessica asked curiously. There was a pause on the line as Cindy considered. "You're serious about this, huh? Well, let me see what I can find. We've got an old staff directory at the clinic. I might be able to dig up her number." Jessica waited as Cindy flipped through some papers on her end. After a few minutes, Cindy came back on the line. "Okay, got it. Her name's Marilyn, and here's the number I found. But Jess, be careful with this. Whatever you're getting into, it sounds messy." Jessica jotted down the number, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. "Thanks, Cindy. I really appreciate this. I'll let you know how it goes." She stared at the digits, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Jessica was about to hang up when a soft, hesitant voice answered. "Hello?" Jessica took a deep breath. "Hi, is this Marilyn?" "Yes, who's this?" The woman sounded wary. "My name is Jessica. I know about what happened with Dr. Carter," Jessica said gently. "I think I might be able to help you." There was a long pause. Jessica could hear Marilyn's shaky breathing on the other end. "How do you know about that?" Marilyn finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a long story," Jessica replied. "But I promise, I'm not here to judge or cause trouble. I really think I can help. Would you be willing to meet with me?" Another pause. Jessica held her breath, silently praying Marilyn would agree. "I don't know," Marilyn said. "I've been through so much already." "I understand," Jessica said softly. "But please, give me a chance. We can meet somewhere public if that makes you more comfortable." Marilyn sighed. Okay, she said finally. There's a coffee shop on Main Street, the Blue Mug. Do you know it? Yes, I do, Jessica replied, relief washing over her. I can meet you there tomorrow at 2 p.m., Marilyn said. But please, I don't want any trouble. No trouble, I promise, Jessica assured her. Thank you, Marilyn. I'll see you tomorrow. As Jessica hung up the phone, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was one step closer to unraveling the mystery of the twins, but she knew she had to tread carefully. Marilyn sounded fragile, and Jessica didn't want to overwhelm her. She looked over at the twins sleeping peacefully in their makeshift crib. We're going to figure this out, she whispered to them. I promise. The next day, Jessica arrived at the Blue Mug 15 minutes early, her nerves on edge. She chose a quiet corner table and ordered a cup of tea, her eyes darting to the door every time it opened. At precisely 2 p.m., a petite woman with tired eyes and hunched shoulders walked in. Jessica recognized her immediately from Cindy's description. Marilyn? Jessica called softly, waving her over. Marilyn nodded, approaching the table cautiously. You must be Jessica, she said, sliding into the seat across from her. Jessica smiled warmly. Thank you for meeting me. Can I get you something to drink? Marilyn shook her head. No, thank you. I'd rather just know why I'm here. Jessica took a deep breath. Marilyn, I know this might be difficult, but I need you to tell me everything that happened between you and Dr. Carter. The full story. Marilyn's eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. Why? What does it matter now? Please, Jessica said gently. It's important. I promise I'm here to help. Marilyn closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and began to speak. I worked as a receptionist at Dr. Carter's clinic. He was charming, always so kind to me. We started an affair. I knew it was wrong, but I fell in love with him. She paused, her voice trembling. When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared but excited. I thought he'd leave his wife for me. But when I told him, he got angry. He said I was trying to trap him. Tears welled up in Marilyn's eyes. I carried the babies to him, hoping he'd change his mind. But when I gave birth to twins, he slapped me, told me to get out of his life. I had no money, no support. I didn't know what to do. Jessica reached out, squeezing Marilyn's hand. What happened next? Marilyn's voice was barely a whisper now. I left them in the park. I thought maybe an orphanage would find them, give them a better life than I could. But I've regretted it every day since. They were my babies, and I just left them there. When I went back there after a few hours, I couldn't find a single trace of them. Jessica's heart ached for Marilyn. Marilyn, I need to tell you something. My son Alan, he found your babies in the park. They're safe. They're with me. Marilyn's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. What? They're okay? Jessica nodded, smiling through her own tears. Yes, they're perfect, beautiful and healthy. Marilyn burst into tears, her whole body shaking. Oh God, I can't believe it. My babies, they're okay. Jessica squeezed her hand again. Marilyn, what Dr. Carter did to you was wrong. It was abuse. We can get justice for you and your children. Will you let me help you? Marilyn nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, please. I want to make this right. I want to see my babies. Jessica stood up, helping Marilyn to her feet. Let's go to my house. Your twins are waiting to meet their mother. As they left the coffee shop, Jessica felt a mix of emotions, relief at finally knowing the truth, anger at Dr. Carter's cruelty, and hope for Marilyn and her children. They got into Jessica's car, ready to start the journey that would reunite a mother with her newborn twins. As soon as they pulled into her driveway, Jessica opened the front door, ushering Marilyn into her home. The sound of soft cooing came from the living room, where Alan sat on the floor, gently playing with the twins. They're here, Jessica called softly to her son. Alan looked up, his eyes wide with curiosity, as Marilyn stepped into view. Marilyn froze, her hand flying to her mouth as she saw her babies for the first time since that terrible day in the park. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a hesitant step forward. Jessica gently guided Marilyn to the couch, helping her sit down. Alan, sensing the importance of the moment, carefully picked up one of the twins and brought her to Marilyn. "This is your mommy," he said softly to the baby, placing her in Marilyn's trembling arms. Marilyn cradled her baby, her tears falling freely now. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, kissing the baby's forehead. "I'm so sorry." Jessica sat beside her, holding the other twin. "You're here now," she said gently. "That's what matters." For a long while, the room was quiet except for the soft sounds of the babies and Marilyn's quiet sobs. Finally, Marilyn looked up at Jessica, her eyes red, but filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "I can never repay you for what you've done." Jessica smiled warmly. "You don't have to, but Marilyn, we need to talk about what happens next." Marilyn's face fell, fear creeping back into her eyes. "What do you mean?" "We need to confront Dr. Carter," Jessica said gently. "What he did to you was wrong. He needs to take responsibility for his actions and for these children." Marilyn shook her head, her body tensing. I can't face him. You don't understand, Jessica. He's powerful. He's respected. Who would believe me over him?" "I believe you," Jessica said firmly, "and I'll stand with you. We have evidence now. These babies. We can prove what he did." Marilyn looked down at the baby in her arms, her expression torn. I know it sounds crazy, but even after everything he did, part of me still loves him. I don't know if I can stand up to him." Jessica reached out, placing a hand on Marilyn's shoulder. "I understand that feeling, Marilyn, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about these babies too, and you deserve justice for what he put you through." Marilyn bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears again. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if he tries to take them away from me? What if he denies everything?" "We won't let that happen," Jessica assured her. "We'll get legal help if we need to. But Marilyn, you need to be strong now. Not just for yourself, but for your children. They need a mother who can stand up for them, who can fight for what's right." Marilyn looked down at the twins, one in her arms and one in Jessica's. She took a deep breath, seeming to draw strength from their innocent faces. "You're right," she said softly. "They deserve better. I need to be better for them." "Look, I think I know how we can get proof of what Dr. Carter did," Jessica said, her voice low but filled with purpose. "We need to record him admitting to his actions." Marilyn's eyes widened, a mix of fear and hope crossing her face. "How?" "You'll call him," Jessica explained gently. "Ask for money to take care of the twins. We'll record the conversation, and hopefully, he'll say something that proves he knew about them." Marilyn hesitated, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know if I can do this." Jessica placed a reassuring hand on Marilyn's arm. "You can. I'll be right here with you. Remember, this is for your children." After a moment, Marilyn nodded, taking a deep breath. "Okay, let's do it." Jessica set up her phone to record the call, and Marilyn dialed Dr. Carter's number with trembling fingers. The phone rang twice before his voice came through. "Hello?" Dr. Carter's tone was clipped and professional, with an undercurrent of impatience. Marilyn's voice shook as she spoke, her words barely above a whisper. "Darius? It's Marilyn. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." There was a long, tense pause on the other end. When Dr. Carter finally responded, his voice was cold and guarded. "Marilyn? What do you want? I thought we agreed not to contact each other anymore." I need money," Marilyn said, her voice growing stronger with each word, fueled by desperation. "To take care of the twins. They're struggling, Darius." "What?" Dr. Carter's voice turned sharp, a mixture of surprise and anger. "What are you talking about? I thought you abandoned those kids already." Marilyn's eyes met Jessica's, who nodded encouragingly, silently urging her to keep going. Marilyn took a deep breath before asking, "How do you know that? About me abandoning them, I mean." Dr. Carter's composure cracked, his words coming out in a rush. One of my patients, Jessica, found those kids. She's been asking questions, poking around where she shouldn't. By now, those kids would have gone to CPS. There's nothing you can do to get money from me, Marilyn. You have no proof, and no one would believe you anyway. Just leave it alone." The call ended abruptly, leaving Marilyn staring at the phone in disbelief. Jessica quickly stopped the recording, a triumphant smile on her face. "We did it," she said softly. "He admitted to knowing about the twins and that you had abandoned them. That's proof, Marilyn." Marilyn nodded, still looking shocked. "I can't believe it was that easy." Jessica squeezed her hand. "You did great. But wait, do you still have your old messages? The one you had when you first told him about the pregnancy?" Marilyn nodded. "Yes, but why?" "Let's check if there are any messages from him about the twins," Jessica suggested. They scrolled through the old messages until Marilyn gasped, pointing at the screen. There, in black and white, was a message from Dr. Carter. "I told you to keep quiet and handle it. I can't have my life ruined over this." Jessica read the message, her heart pounding. "This is it, Marilyn. Between this message and the recorded call, we have the proof we need." Marilyn looked at Jessica, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "What do we do now?" Jessica took a deep breath, her mind already racing with the next steps. "Now we make sure Dr. Carter takes responsibility for his actions and these beautiful children." Jessica and Marilyn then decided to contact the doctor's wife to expose him and make him pay for his misbehavior. Just then, Marilyn gasped, saying, "What if she doesn't believe us? Or worse, what if she tells him and he comes after us? He's not the type to let this go easily." Jessica shook her head, trying to reassure her friend. "It's a risk, I know. But she deserves to know the truth about her husband, especially when it involves the twins. Besides, if she sees the recording and the messages, there's no way she can ignore it. We just have to try." Jessica paced back and forth in her living room, her mind racing with possibilities. Now contacting Amanda or even finding a way to get in touch with her is our only hurdle. If we could just speak to her directly, maybe she'd realize what's really going on. Marilyn, sitting on the edge of the couch, bit her lip thoughtfully before speaking up. "That's not an issue," she said. "When I used to work at the clinic, Amanda always came down to Dr. Carter's office around 1 p.m., just before she picked up their kids from school. She has this routine. She'd stop by for a few minutes, sometimes to chat, sometimes just to check in. We could catch her then, talk to her outside his office, and ask for a meeting." Jessica's eyes brightened with hope. "You think she'd agree to listen to us?" Marilyn shrugged, a little uncertainty creeping into her expression. "I don't know, but if we can catch her when she's on her own, maybe she'll hear us out. It's worth a shot, right?" They spent the rest of the morning planning their approach. As 1 p.m. drew closer, Jessica and Marilyn made their way to the clinic, parking a little distance away to avoid drawing attention. Jessica's hands were clammy on the steering wheel, her nerves getting the better of her. She glanced over at Marilyn, who looked equally tense, cradling her phone like a lifeline. They waited near the back entrance where Amanda usually came and went. At precisely 1:10 p.m., Amanda's familiar SUV pulled into the lot. She stepped out, her expression composed, carrying the air of someone who had everything in order. As she walked toward the entrance, Jessica and Marilyn hurried over. "Amanda!" Jessica called, her voice a little too loud in the otherwise quiet parking lot. Amanda turned, a slight frown creasing her face as she looked at the two women approaching her. "Do I know you?" Amanda asked, her tone cool and guarded. She glanced between Jessica and Marilyn, clearly trying to place them. "No, but this is really important," Jessica said quickly. "We need to talk to you about something. About your husband. It's not what you think. Could we just have a few minutes of your time?" Amanda's frown deepened and she folded her arms across her chest, clearly irritated. "Look, if this is some kind of scam or if you're looking to stir up trouble, I'm not interested. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to leave." Marilyn stepped forward, her voice more gentle but firm. "Please, just hear us out. It's about something that's been hidden from you, something you deserve to know. If you don't believe us, that's fine, but can you at least give us a chance to explain?" Amanda hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she studied their faces. Her reluctance was clear, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her expression. "Why should I trust you?" Marilyn reached into her pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper with her number written on it. "Here's my number," she said, holding it out to Amanda. "I know this is all sudden, and you don't have any reason to believe us right now. But if you change your mind, if you decide you want to know more, just call me. I swear, we're not here to make trouble for you. We're just trying to make sure you know the truth." Amanda looked at the paper for a long moment before reluctantly taking it. "Fine, but don't expect me to call," she said stiffly, slipping the paper into her purse. Without another word, she turned and walked into the clinic, leaving Jessica and Marilyn standing in the parking lot, feeling a mix of frustration and lingering hope. As they walked back to the car, Jessica let out a sigh, trying to release some of the tension. "Do you think she'll call?" Marilyn shook her head, her expression weary. "I don't know, Jess. She seemed pretty set on ignoring us, but maybe she'll think about it later. At least we tried." They drove back home, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavily between them. When they reached Jessica's house, they parted ways. Jessica headed inside to check on Alan, and Marilyn made her way back to the women's shelter along with her twins, hopeful that she would be able to give them a better life. The rest of the day passed quickly, with no signs of contact from Amanda. Jessica called Marilyn many times, but each time she got a disappointing no. Finally, around 10 p.m. at night, something happened with Marilyn. Just as she was about to drift into uneasy sleep, her phone buzzed loudly on the small table beside her. Marilyn's heart leapt in her chest as she saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. She grabbed the phone, hesitating for a moment before answering. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a voice she recognized from earlier that day. "It's Amanda. You said you had something to tell me about my husband. Something serious." Her voice was different now, no longer dismissive but edged with unease. "I don't know why, but I can't shake the feeling that you're telling the truth, or at least part of it. He's been acting strange lately, and if there's something you know, I want to hear it. But I need proof. Real proof. I'm not going to waste my time on rumors." Marilyn's breath caught in her throat and she sat up straighter, her heart racing. "I understand we have the proof, but it's not something we can explain over the phone. Can we meet somewhere? Tomorrow, maybe?" Amanda sighed, clearly debating her next move. Marilyn exhaled in relief, gripping the phone tightly. "Thank you, Amanda. You won't regret hearing us out. I promise." As the call ended, Marilyn sat in the dim room, feeling a surge of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. She quickly dialed Jessica to let her know about the meeting. Next day, Jessica's heart raced as she and Marilyn approached the quaint cafe on the corner of Main Street. The warm aroma of coffee and freshly baked pastries wafted through the air, but it did little to calm her nerves. She spotted Amanda, Dr. Carter's wife, sitting at a corner table, her posture rigid and her eyes darting nervously around the room. "Are you ready?" Jessica whispered to Marilyn, who nodded hesitantly. They made their way to the table, and Jessica extended her hand. "Mrs. Carter, I'm Jessica, and this is Marilyn. Thank you for meeting us." Amanda shook their hands cautiously, her eyes narrowing. "What's this about? You said you had important information about my husband?" Jessica took a deep breath. "Mrs. Carter, what we're about to tell you isn't easy to hear, but we believe you deserve to know the truth." Marilyn, her voice trembling slightly, began to speak. I had an affair with your husband, Dr. Carter. It resulted in the birth of twins." Amanda's face contorted in disbelief and anger. "What? This is ridiculous. You're lying." Jessica held up her hands in a calming gesture. "Please, hear us out. We have proof." She proceeded to explain how Alan had found the abandoned twins in the park and how they had traced the babies back to Marilyn and Dr. Carter. Amanda listened, her face a mix of shock and skepticism. "This is absurd," Amanda spat. "Do you want to extort money from us? Do you really expect me to believe this wild story?" Marilyn's eyes welled with tears. "I wish it wasn't true, but it is. and we can prove it." With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and played the recorded conversation with Dr. Carter. His voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the air between them. "I thought you abandoned those kids already. One of my patients, Jessica, found those kids. There's nothing you can do to get money from me, Marilyn. You have no proof." As the recording ended, a heavy silence fell over the table. Amanda sat frozen, her face drained of color. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, darted between Jessica and Marilyn. This can't be true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jessica reached out, placing a gentle hand on Amanda's arm. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Carter. We didn't want to hurt you, but we felt you needed to know the truth." Amanda jerked her arm away, her shock quickly turning to anger. "I want a copy of that recording," she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. Marilyn nodded, quickly sending the file to Amanda's phone. As soon as the transfer was complete, Amanda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to go," she stammered, grabbing her purse. Her hands trembled as she gathered her things, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Without another word, Amanda turned and stormed out of the cafe, leaving Jessica and Marilyn sitting in stunned silence. They watched through the window as she hurried down the street, her shoulders shaking with what they could only assume were sobs. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their well-manicured lawn, Amanda's car pulled into the driveway of the Carter residence. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation ahead. Inside, Dr. Darius Carter was lounging in his favorite armchair, sipping a glass of whiskey and scrolling through his phone. He looked up as Amanda burst through the door, her face a storm of emotions. "Darius," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "We need to talk. Now." Dr. Carter set down his glass, his brow furrowing in concern. "Amanda, what's wrong?" Without a word, Amanda pulled out her phone and hit play. Dr. Carter's own voice filled the room, his words damning him with every syllable. His face paled as he listened, realizing the gravity of the situation. "I can explain," he started, but Amanda cut him off. "Explain what, Darius? How you had an affair, how you fathered twins and then abandoned them, how you've been lying to me all this time." Her voice rose with each question, tears of anger and betrayal streaming down her face. Dr. Carter stood up, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Amanda, please, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" Amanda laughed bitterly. She pulled up the text messages on her phone. "Then explain this. I told you to keep quiet and handle it. I can't have my life ruined over this." "Your own words, Darius. Your own damning words." Dr. Carter's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air, desperately searching for an explanation that didn't exist. I made a mistake," he finally managed to stammer out. "It was a moment of weakness. I never meant for any of this to happen." Amanda's eyes flashed with fury. "A moment of weakness? You fathered children, Darius. You abandoned them, and you've been lying to me for months, maybe years." She paced the room, running her hands through her hair in frustration. "I've stood by you through everything. I've defended you when people questioned your ethics. I believed in you, trusted you, and this is how you repay that trust?" Dr. Carter reached out to touch her arm, but she jerked away from him. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "I can't even look at you right now." She turned to face him, her decision clear in her eyes. "I want a divorce, Darius. I'm done covering for your lies, done pretending everything is perfect when it's all falling apart." Dr. Carter's face crumpled. "Amanda, please, we can work this out. Think about our children, our life together." "Our children?" Amanda's voice was ice cold. "You mean the ones you didn't abandon in a park? They're coming with me. I won't let them stay here with a man who could do something so heartless. As much as I hate that woman, Marilyn, I hate you even more for doing what you did to me." She stormed upstairs, leaving Dr. Carter standing shell-shocked in the living room. A few minutes later, she returned with 2 small suitcases and their sleepy-eyed children in tow. "Mommy," their youngest asked, rubbing his eyes, "where are we going?" "We're going on a little trip to Nana's, sweetie," Amanda said, her voice softening as she addressed her child. "Say goodbye to Daddy for now." Dr. Carter watched helplessly as Amanda ushered the children out the door. As it slammed shut behind them, he sank to his knees, the full weight of his actions crashing down upon him. Darius then decided to call Marilyn. "Marilyn, thank God," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I need your help. Amanda knows everything, and she's leaving me. You have to tell her the recording is fake." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Dr. Carter's heart raced as he waited for her response. "Please, Marilyn," he begged, his voice cracking. "It's the only way I can save my marriage. Just tell her it was all a misunderstanding, that we never had an affair." Marilyn remained silent, letting Dr. Carter's desperate pleas fill the air between them. With each passing second, he grew more frantic. "I'll do anything," he promised. "I'll pay you, I'll help with the twins, whatever you want. Just please help me fix this." Finally, Marilyn spoke, her voice calm and steady. "No, Darius. I won't lie for you." Dr. Carter felt his world crumbling around him. "But Marilyn, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "I understand how it felt when you abandoned me and our children when we needed you most. I understand the fear and desperation of being alone with 2 newborns and nowhere to turn." Her words hit Dr. Carter like a physical blow. He struggled to find a response, but Marilyn continued. "You made your choices, Darius. Now you have to live with the consequences. I won't help you deceive your wife or anyone else. It's time for the truth to come out." Before Dr. Carter could protest further, the line went dead. He stared at his phone in disbelief, the reality of his situation sinking in. Across town, Marilyn set down her phone, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time in months, she felt truly free. The fear and anxiety that had plagued her since the affair began seemed to melt away. Jessica, who had been sitting nearby during the call, reached out and squeezed Marilyn's hand. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Marilyn nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. It's just, for so long, I was afraid of him, of what he might do if I spoke up. But now you can start fresh," Jessica finished for her. "You and the twins have a whole new life ahead of you." "But I don't even know how I'll manage to find a job here," Marilyn confessed, her voice cracking slightly. "I hardly know anyone, and with the twins to care for, I don't have the time to go around applying everywhere." Jessica, who had been listening attentively, leaned forward, offering a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about the twins, Marilyn. I'll look after them for you while you focus on job hunting. And I have a pretty good network around town. I'll ask around and see if anyone knows of a job opening that could work for you." Marilyn's eyes filled with gratitude, and she reached out to squeeze Jessica's hand. "Thank you, Jessica. I don't know what I'd do without you." Later that evening, Jessica returned home and was greeted by her son, Alan, who ran to her with his usual enthusiasm. "Mom, are the twins okay? I miss playing with them," he said, looking up at her with big, hopeful eyes. Jessica ruffled his hair with a smile. "They're doing well, sweetheart. You'll get to play with them again soon. Marilyn is working hard to make a better life for them, and we're helping her out, okay?" Alan nodded eagerly. "Okay, Mom, I can't wait to see them again." After tucking Alan into bed, Jessica settled down with her phone, determined to make good on her promise to Marilyn. She called up friends and acquaintances, inquiring if anyone knew of job openings that might suit Marilyn. After Jessica spent hours calling her friends for job leads without success, her husband overheard one of her conversations from the hallway. Moved by the compassion in her voice and her determination to help someone in need, even someone he had been biased against, he quietly stepped into the room. The sight of Jessica working so hard to find opportunities for Marilyn, despite their differences, stirred something deep within him. He cleared his throat, catching her attention. Jessica turned, surprised to see him standing there. "Hey," she said, offering a tentative smile, unsure of what he might say. Her husband took a deep breath, his expression softer than she'd seen in a long time. "Jess, I heard you on the phone," he began, his voice wavering slightly. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I see how hard you're trying to help her even though she's black, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I reacted earlier, for not supporting you when you needed it." Jessica blinked, taken aback by his unexpected apology. "You are?" He nodded, looking down at his hands as if gathering his thoughts. "Yeah, I am. Seeing you do this, it's made me realize some things. Maybe I've been wrong. I'm not proud of the way I acted, but watching you, it's changed how I see things." He took another step closer, his tone earnest. "I actually have a friend who runs a small clinic downtown. They mentioned they might be looking for some help. It's not a nursing job, but it's a start. Marilyn could go there and interview if she's interested." It wasn't exactly nursing, but it required someone with a friendly demeanor and an understanding of basic medical terms, skills that Marilyn certainly had. "Thank you so much," Jessica said to Jack, hugging him. "I'll let her know right away." She called Marilyn, who picked up on the second ring. "Marilyn, great news. There's a receptionist position open at a local medical office. It's not exactly nursing, but it's a start, and it's perfect for someone with your experience. They're doing interviews tomorrow morning. Can you make it?" Marilyn's voice was filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Yes, I can make it. Thank you, Jessica. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this." "Don't worry about that," Jessica replied, smiling into the phone. "Just focus on nailing that interview, and I'll take care of the twins while you're there." The next morning, Marilyn arrived at Jessica's house with the twins, her nerves showing in the way she fidgeted with her bag. "Thank you again, Jessica. I don't think I could do this without you," she said as she handed over the diaper bag. Jessica waved off her gratitude with a laugh. "You're going to do great, Marilyn. Just be yourself and show them what you can do. Now go on. Good luck." Marilyn gave her twins one last kiss and headed out, trying to keep her hands from trembling as she drove to the interview. When she arrived at the office, her nerves only worsened. The waiting room was filled with candidates, all of them well-dressed and confident, and all of them white. Marilyn felt a pang of doubt creep into her chest. How could she compete with them? Would the interviewer see past her background and give her a fair chance? She took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything she'd already overcome. "You've faced worse, Marilyn," she whispered to herself. "You can do this." When her name was called, she stood up, smoothed out her second-hand blouse, and walked into the interview room with her head held high. The interviewer, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses, gestured for her to sit. "Marilyn, right?" the interviewer began, glancing over her resume. "So, you've worked as a nurse. Why do you think you'd be a good fit for a receptionist role?" Marilyn felt the weight of the question settle over her, but she gathered her thoughts and smiled warmly. "I know my background might not be typical for this position, but I believe it gives me an edge. As a nurse, I learned how to handle stressful situations and communicate effectively with patients who were often scared or upset. I think those skills would be invaluable at the front desk, where first impressions matter." The interviewer raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You make a good point. But what would you do if the office got really busy and you had to juggle multiple tasks at once?" Marilyn leaned forward slightly, her confidence growing. "I'd do what I always did as a nurse. Prioritize the most urgent needs, keep a calm demeanor, and remember that each person who walks through that door deserves respect and attention. And I'd make sure that even when things are hectic, every patient feels seen and heard." The interviewer nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes on her pad. When the interview concluded, she stood and shook Marilyn's hand. "Thank you for coming in, Marilyn. We'll be in touch." Marilyn thanked her and walked out of the office with a hopeful heart, feeling like she had done her best. As she drove back to Jessica's house, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to have a steady job again, to be able to provide for her twins without constantly worrying about money. When she arrived at Jessica's, the twins were playing on the living room floor with Alan, who was showing them how to stack colorful blocks into a tower. Marilyn watched them with a smile, her heart swelling with gratitude for the friend she had found in Jessica. As the seasons changed, so did Marilyn's life. With each passing month, her confidence grew, and her situation improved. Her hard work at the office paid off, earning her a promotion to head supervisor. The extra income allowed her to start saving, dreaming of a better future for her twins. One crisp autumn day, Jessica called Marilyn with exciting news. "I found an apartment for you," she exclaimed. "It's in a safer neighborhood closer to good schools. Want to check it out?" Marilyn's heart raced with excitement. "Really? Oh, Jessica, that would be wonderful." The next day, they toured the small but tidy two-bedroom apartment. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the freshly painted walls. Marilyn could already picture her twins playing in the living room, their laughter filling the space. "It's perfect," Marilyn whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be able to give them a home like this." Jessica squeezed her hand. "You've worked so hard for this, Marilyn. You deserve it." With Jessica's help, Marilyn signed the lease and moved in the following week. As she tucked the twins into their new beds that first night, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. Months flew by, and before Marilyn knew it, the twins' first birthday was approaching. She spent weeks planning a small celebration, wanting to make it special despite their limited means. The morning of the party, Marilyn woke early, her heart full of emotion. She gazed at her sleeping babies, marveling at how much they'd grown. Picking up her phone, she dialed Jessica's number. "Jessica?" Marilyn said softly when her friend answered. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted you and Alan to be the first ones I invite to the twins' birthday party this afternoon. You've been such a big part of our lives, and I couldn't imagine celebrating without you." Jessica's voice was warm with affection. "Oh, Marilyn, we'd be honored. Alan will be so excited. What time should we come over?" As Marilyn hung up, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She sat on the edge of her bed, looking around the cozy apartment that now felt like home. Tears of joy rolled down her cheeks as she reflected on how far she'd come. Just a year ago, she had been alone, scared, and desperate. She had made the heartbreaking decision to leave her babies in the park, hoping someone would find them and give them a better life than she could. Now, here she was, planning their first birthday party in their own home. Marilyn thought about the challenges she'd faced, the prejudice at work, the struggle to make ends meet, the fear of Dr. Carter's influence. But she also remembered the kindness she'd encountered. Jessica's unwavering support, Marta's willingness to give her a chance, and even the gradual acceptance from her co-workers. As she heard the twins beginning to stir, Marilyn wiped her eyes and stood up. She had decorations to hang and a cake to bake. Today was a day for celebration, not just of her baby's first year, but of her own journey as well. If you enjoyed the story of Marilyn, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.